Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be talking about hemorrhage, and we'll be mainly concerned with surgical part of hemorrhage.
Well, issue.
So let's talk about hemorrhage, and we need to know about differences between the surgical hemorrhage and the medical cause of hemorrhage. And likely the treatment will be different for surgical part of the hemorrhage and the medical cause of hemorrhage. And if you see any patient with hemorrhage, you need to differentiate between surgical and medical, and the treatment will be different. Hemorrhage basically means escape of blood outside from vessel, uh, uh, and it is outside from the vessel. Vessels means blood vessels or veins, or even from heart. If there is a trauma to heart, if there is exsanguination of blood from heart is there, it is also the part of hemorrhage. So how we classify hemorrhage? It can be arterial, it can be venous, it can be capillary, and this is the basic principle you might be knowing. If there is a bright red color and a spotting of or jet-like propulsion of blood, then it is arterial blood. If there is dark red, means desaturated blood and steady and continuous flow. And in fact, control of venous hemorrhage is more tedious work compared to that of arterial hemorrhage. And another part is the capillary, and there will be oozing of blood from if there is capillary is injured. Here we can see in picture capillary, venous, and arterial part, and this is the basic knowledge you should know. If you see if there is bleeding in patient, you need to differentiate whether the patient is having blood or having hemorrhage from arterial or venous or capillary part, and the treatment part will be the different. Based on the time of onset of hemorrhage, in surgical part, we classify hemorrhage in three parts, and after surgery or during surgery or even after a few days of surgery, patient may have a hemorrhage. So if there is a hemorrhage during surgery, it is called primary hemorrhage, and this may occur due to surgical part, or if there is a difficulty in surgical control of blood vessels, or it may occur if there is a physiological derangement in coagulation. For example, in case of malignancy, you may anticipate to have more hemorrhage in case of malignancy, and if there is a sometime hemorrhage may occur after surgery. It may occur after 24 hours of surgery, and this is called reactionary hemorrhage, or it may occur in any time frame from after surgery to up to 24 hours. And main cause is there is a slippage or dislodgement of clot, or if there is a faulty suture ligation is there, then patient may have blood hemorrhage even after surgery, and it may occur up to 24 hours. So similarly, if there is a infection or necrosis or other parts, this may cause secondary hemorrhage, and it may occur after 7 days to 14 days, and more likely cause is likely due to infection. And logically, you may anticipate infection only after a few days of surgery. You cannot anticipate infection or pressure necrosis just after surgery. So you need to define the type of hemorrhage in surgery. Excuse me. Okay, so there are three types of hemorrhage which may occur after surgery. Based on the types of hemorrhage, we can classify hemorrhage in revealed hemorrhage or concealed hemorrhage. As the name suggests, if there is obvious external hemorrhage, it should be in the part of revealed hemorrhage. But sometimes, for example, in case of abdominal trauma, you may see there is no external hemorrhage, but the patient go into shock. So there may be intra-abdominal, intrathoracic hemorrhage, and this is the part of concealed hemorrhage. But you need to know that in case of intracranial hemorrhage, it is unlikely that patient will go into shock, because the intracranial cavity is a small space, and bleeding or hemorrhage in that part of body will not lead to hemorrhagic shock. So if you see patient have trauma and there is a shock, you need to find out hemorrhage in thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity. Here is the tabulated form. You can see revealed hemorrhage is visible and concealed hemorrhage the same thing. If there is a solid organ injury, and we need initially sometimes there may be concealed hemorrhage and later it become revealed. For example, in case of hematuria, hematemesis, and melena, we may see later there is a revealed hemorrhage. There is another classification of hemorrhage, which is acute hemorrhage, chronic hemorrhage, and acute and chronic hemorrhage. Acute hemorrhage is after trauma, as we know, or after surgery. There may be acute hemorrhage. Chronic hemorrhage may occur in case of peptic ulcer disease or carcinoma of cecum. You can see chronic hemorrhage, and the patient will have anemia, and there will be different physiological pattern in both the in acute versus chronic hemorrhage. And there may be sometimes acute and chronic hemorrhage occur. It is more dangerous because bleeding may occur in the individual who are already hypoxic, and these patients may present with the more severe form of hemorrhage, and it is difficult to resuscitate this patient. Similarly, as I have already talked, we need to differentiate surgical hemorrhage and non-surgical hemorrhage. Surgical hemorrhage is due to the direct injury, or the patient have coagulopathy is okay, and it is due to bleeding from the vessels which is injured during surgery, and we need to know the technical part of controlling the hemorrhage in this case. But sometimes you may see the patient have non-surgical hemorrhage. The patient has coagulopathy. Because of this coagulopathy, patient may bleed, and we can do much with surgical intervention in this patient, and we need to treat with coagulants and different blood products to correct the coagulopathy in this patient. Similarly, you can see what is the pathophysiology of hemorrhage. As you can see, there is a bleeding, and then hypovolemia, low cardiac output, tachycardia, hypoxia. We need to know that shock. Hemorrhage leads to shock. Shock is basically global hypoxia. This may occur due to several causes, but hypovolemic shock or hemorrhagic shock is one of the common cause of shock, and basically this will lead to hypoxia, and this hypoxia will cause activation of cardiac depressants, sickle cell syndrome. Patient will have hyponatremia, hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, and obviously patient will have metabolic acidosis. And these all traumatic loss of blood or hemorrhagic shock will lead to coagulopathy in itself, and then there will be platelet coagulant dysfunction, and the patient will have progressive hemodilution, and this will lead to total cardiac failure, because the heart will try to pump the blood so that oxygen will be adequate in the cellular level, but because of less hemoglobin, this cannot do the same, and ultimately the patient will have total circulatory failure, and patient may go into shock and death. It is the same thing. Trauma leads to fibrinolysis, inflammation, and similarly hemorrhage leads to shock, hypothermia, and acidosis, and hemodilution. These all leads to the coagulopathy, and these three things are under the lethal triad: coagulopathy, acidosis, and hypothermia, and these together constitute lethal triad. And if the patient has coagulopathy, if the patient has acidosis in ABG, and patient has hypothermia, likely the patient will have less chance of survival. There is another classification of ATLS. This is classified class. So we need to know at which level or at which class the patient is there in emergency. Class 1 basically refers to the 15% blood loss, and there is a vasoconstriction, but patient will have normal BP and pulse pressure. We may confuse the patient has normal blood pressure, but the patient is still in hemorrhage, so need to act early. And this part of compensation is basically managed by epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is secreted in response to the autonomic nervous system activation after hemorrhage. That in stage 2 there is 15 to 25% loss of total blood, and early decompensation is there. This is classified in early decompensation, and the BP is in unstable form. Patient will start showing tachycardia and tachypnea. So tachypnea and tachypnea is the first clinical sign which may be recognized during hemorrhage, and we need to pick up early so that the patient will not go into decompensation or shock or death. And the patient will in this stage will have decreased pulse strength, narrowing of pulse pressure, and significant catecholamines release is there, due to which there is a vasoconstriction in periphery, and there is shunting of blood to the vital organs, and the patient will have cool, clumsy skin and thirst, and the patient will have increased anxiety and agitation due to these catecholamines. However, the renal output is maintained because of this compensatory mechanism. When patient comes to the stage 3, which means the 25 to 35% of blood is lost, and this is classified in late decompensation, and it is a early irreversible phase, because once the patient go into stage 4, patient will be in irreversible stage. So this is likely the poor, the patient will have poor outcome, and here the compensatory mechanism of sympathetic nervous system will unlikely to restore the hemostasis in the body. And the patient will have the classical signs of shock, weak 3D, rapid pulse, tachypnea, anxiety, restless, decreased loss of consciousness is there, and patient obviously will have pale, cool, and clumsy skin. And when patient is in the last stage of hemorrhage, in stage 4 means the patient has almost 2 liters of blood is lost, and 35% of the total circulating blood volume is lost. The patient is in the irreversible stage. You have the patient has poor outcome, and the likely patient has less chance of survival, because he or she is already in irreversible stage, and patient has a barely palpable pulse, respiration. Patient has very cool, clumsy, very pale, and unlikely to survival. So the message is that the patient should be picked up early in the class, early in the stage 1 or 2, so that the survival rate will be better. And we have to, being clinician, you should know the different clinical signs, and so that you can pick up early, and resuscitation will be done early, so that the outcome will be better. Clinical features of hemorrhage, as we know, pallor, thirsty, cyanosis, tachycardia, these are the same thing, dry face. So we need to examine this part. Patient need to have we need to know from history, from in the examination and then investigation. So in examination, you need to find out if there is a clumsy hand is there, patient is has a ear hunger, tachypnea is there, tachycardia is there, patient has dry tongue, and urine output is less. So we need to act early. We have to give fluid, or if the investigation shows less hemoglobin, then we have to transfuse blood. Signs of symptom blood loss already. Patient will have the increased pulse, systolic BP, or mean arterial pressure will be less, and there's something called shock index. You need to know it is a ratio of heart rate to systolic blood pressure, and if it is greater than 1, it has poor indication. It has similarly there is a modified in shock index, where we take instead of blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, mean arterial pressure is taken, and these are the different indicators so that we can take up early in early, and the resuscitation will be better. So, what are the methods to measure the blood loss? For example, in surgical part, we do need to know how much blood is lost is there. So during surgery, and we need to act accordingly. And we have some parameters so that we can have roughly estimate of blood loss. For example, there is a clot size. Is clean fish type size of blood clot is there, it is likely 500 ml. If in tibial fracture, likely we have 5 to 1500 ml or so of blood loss is there. Femur fracture, we have about 1500 ml blood loss is there. After surgery, you can weigh the swab before and after so that you can estimate blood loss. And the same thing, subtracting empty suction bottle with we can, or from the suction bottle, we can estimate how much blood is lost, and so that the blood replacement can be given. And there is something called rain factor, where we calculate the total amount of blood loss, and basically it is the difference in the swab weight into 1.5 is the actual blood loss, and for larger swab it should be multiplied with factor 2. So what is the actual blood loss? Same thing, blood volume initial and blood volume hematocrit final should be divided with hematocrit mean, and blood volume, as we know, it's body weight into 70 ml. But in case of children, there is more blood, and in neonates 85 to 90 ml per kg of blood is there. If you calculate weight, we can calculate the approximate blood volume in either adult or in children or neonate, and obviously neonate will have a high proportion of blood is there. What is about poor hemoglobin? We generally take hemoglobin, but we need to know that because of hemodilution, BS is a poor indicator. We cannot rely on hemoglobin level only. We need to rely on the different parameters, vitals, and hemoglobin can be just number, but we need to look upon the overall level or overall status of the patient, vital status, or if the patient is doing well or not, or urine output is good or not, BP is coming or not. So we divide patient into non-responders, transient responders, and responder according to fluid what we give. Okay. So if you give fluid and patient has cope up with, if you give fluid and patient blood pressure comes up, then these are called the responders. However, if you give fluid but the patient is not responding to the fluid, BP is not coming up, then these are classified in or grouped in non-responders, or they are in between. The patient may have transient responders. So this basically happens because of different response to fluid, different response to cardiovascular system, and if there is a cardiac toxicities there after trauma due to different inflammatory mediation, patient may not respond to fluid, and patient may go into cardiac shock, or there may be pulmonary edema. So we need to classify if the patient is responder or non-responder or transient responder. Obviously, responder will have better outcome. Effects of hemorrhage is acute renal shutdown, liver dysfunction, cardiac depression, hypoxia, metabolic acidosis, GI mucosa. These all are due to global hypoxemia, because hemorrhage will lead to shock and will cause multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. How will you manage a case of hemorrhage? Management part consists of investigation and then treatment. Already we need to investigate about the blood pressure, pulse, examination should be the hemoglobin, PAC cell, ABG analysis, if the patient has acidosis or not, because shock is basically the patient will have cellular response or hypoxia will be there. So we need to do ABG, blood volume estimation, measurement of central venous pressure, and ultrasound of the abdomen and chest to look for any ongoing hemorrhage in the chest or abdomen, Doppler part to see if there is blood vessels are okay or not, angiogram in case of major blood vessel injury, for example, if there is thoracic trauma, chest X-ray of the to see if there is hemothorax or not, CT scan. These days we do pan CT in trauma patients so that we can find out the site of injury or site of hemorrhage in this patient, and CT scan is one of the important tool. If the patient is stable, you can send patient to CT scan, but if the patient is not stable, you have to first resuscitate and then only evaluated. In the evaluation should be done later only after resuscitation plan. Resuscitation part. So hemorrhage must be recognized and managed aggressively because the patient go into irreversible state. Hemorrhage is treated by arresting not only by fluid or transfusion. Bleeding should be arrested. We cannot control or we cannot resuscitate only with the blood because we have to control the bleeding part. If there is bleeding vessels, we have to take the patient to OT, and then bleeding part or bleeding vessels should be controlled. Similarly, necessary to need to give the supporting measures. Obviously, patient is in shock, so he or she need the supporting measures in the form of the patient need this ventilation or anything else. Patient need to warm. So in this patient, we have to give the supportive measures to the patient so that patient will not go into. So will come in this if the time is out. Okay, am I audible? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you rejoin after the session is over. Okay.
Okay.
And so we need to, the main theme is that you need to act as early as possible so that patient will not go into decompensated state or a state of irreversibility. So principle of management is identify hemorrhage, immediate resuscitation maneuvers, identify the site of hemorrhage control, and there's something called damage control resuscitation, which we'll be talking later. Identify hemorrhage. We need to identify which part. External hemorrhage is easy to identify, and we can control with pressure, with position, and this is something called hypovolemia should be assumed due to hemorrhage until and unless excluded in case of trauma patient. If there is hypovolemia, it's likely due to hemorrhage until and unless it is proven otherwise. Immediate resuscitation maneuvers are the same in all emergency patients. You have to look for airway, breathing, circulation. If the patient is talking, airways educated, we have to act accordingly. If the patient is not, the patient is unconscious, we have to secure airway by either ventilation or tracheostomy. Similarly, breathing, patient is breathing or not, circulation, here comes where we are talking about the hemorrhage. Circulation we have to give, we have to apply a large bore intravenous acid, blood drawn from for cross matching, and give blood if there is hemoglobin is in the lower side. Identify the site of hemorrhage. We have to know the exact location. Sometimes there may be concealed hemorrhage in abdomen or thorax. Sometimes maybe there is a in GI tract. Hemorrhage is there. For example, if the patient is alcoholic and variceal bleeding is there, we have to go for endoscopic procedure to control hemorrhage. Sometimes lower GI tract hemorrhage is there, we have to go for colonoscopy to control hemorrhage. So we need to identify the site of hemorrhage. And investigation plot must be appropriate to the patient's physiological condition. That as I was talking earlier, the patient physiological condition guide the investigation. For example, if the patient is not responding, patient is in shock, we cannot go for CT scan. First, we need to resuscitate patient. So, or sometimes we do something called fast scan, focused assessment of abdominal trauma, where we assess for to assess for site of hemorrhage either from the abdomen or for thorax. It is basically an ultrasonography of abdomen and chest to look for the site of hemorrhage or to confirm if there is intra-abdominal bleeding going on or not. So how to control hemorrhage? It should be rapidly, as you know, it should for lethal threat. We act so that patient will not go into severe stage. It should be unnecessary investigation should not be done. Resuscitation should be done earlier, and attention should be paid to correct the coagulopathy. We can give blood products, which we will talk in. We will be talking another session. There's a different composition of blood which is given during trauma. Not only whole blood, we give platelet, plasma, platelet concentrate, and then trace frozen plasma, so that the coagulopathy will be corrected. Obviously, if there is patient has external hemorrhage, direct pressure will help you. Pressure dressing will help you. Elevation, ice packing, pressure point constricting band. These are the things which may be applied to control the external hemorrhage. Tourniquet is something which we can apply, but it has some drawback, because if we apply tourniquet to major vessel, the ischemia to the distal part will occur, and tourniquet is only the last resort you can apply. And the internal hemorrhage control, the patient has internal hemorrhage control. If the patient has internal hemorrhage, for example, hematoma, patient in hematoma in blood, sorry, in muscle or fascia, it will be like tourniquet, and it will stop on itself. General management is you have to immobilize, stabilize, epistaxis, we have to find out the trauma or hypertension cause and treat accordingly. Hemoptysis, esophageal, variceal, melena, diverticulosis. These are the things which comes under internal hemorrhage, and we have to look, we have to be very vigilant if there is bleeding is going on at this site, and we have to act accordingly. Surgical intervention may be limited to minimum necessary stop. There is something called damage control surgery, means the patient may need surgical intervention, which is not the actual intervention. Surgical intervention is given so that there is a less damage, and will be doing the definitive treatment only after the stabilization of patient. And damage control surgery has 4 heading. You have to arrest hemorrhage, control sepsis, protect from further injury. Nothing else. You have to do or act as fast as you can, so that we have no time to do the definitive surgery. We just need to control and arrest the hemorrhage, or control sepsis, protect from further injury, and we'll be doing for definitive treatment or definitive surgery after 2 or 3 days once the patient is stabilized. Damage control resuscitation. We have to anticipate and treat the acute traumatic coagulopathy, permissive hypotension. Why permissive hypotension? Because if you give anthropic agent or BPs in the higher side, patient will have more bleeding. Similarly, we have to control giving lots of fluid, because fluid itself may cause coagulopathy, hemodilation, and hypothermia. This will ultimately lead to poor outcome in the patient. Damage control surgery to control the hemorrhage and preserve the physiology. Yes, we are here to control hemorrhage and to preserve the physiological derangement, which may lead to poor outcome. So it is shown that we are in the era of evidence-based surgery or evidence-based medicine. So it is shown that if you are doing according to the damage control resuscitation, the outcome is better in these patients compared to that of traditional mode of resuscitation of these hemorrhagic patient. Treatment is you have to restore the blood. You can give fluid, anatropic. Sometimes blood is needed. 1 unit of blood is likely to rise 1 gram% of hemoglobin. Catheterization to look into the patient is in shock or not, so that we have to give accordingly. The fluid part will be given accordingly. Oxygen support, maybe intubation, ventilation, because patient is in shock and we have to give either renal support, oxygen support, pressure packing, head and down triangular position to control the bleeding, wound exploration and proceeding, ligation of the small vessel. Why we need to explore? So that we can suture these bleeding vessels and come out immediately, and later on only we'll do with the this actual interventional part. ICT packing for the hemothorax, laparotomy, we may have bleeding from the liver and spleen. We'll just only go, we go for laparotomy, just pack in the splenic area, liver area, so and come out. And once the bleeding is controlled, we re-look into abdomen to go for definitive surgery. For example, hepatectomy, splenectomy, and topical application of, for example, oxygen. These are the different gels, different methods to control the ongoing bleed. Local hemostatic agent collagen from can be given, and the venous embolus can be. Tourniquet is often used in operation. Tourniquet is often used in operation theater for control of hemorrhage. TP and CVP1 electrolyte management, and ventilator support. These are the things which are given during acute phase, so that the patient will come to physiological balance, homeostasis. Then only later we do for the definitive part of surgery. Local hemostatic agent, gelatin sponge of microfibrillator powder, topical from surgery. We apply it normally, where it is very commonly used in during surgery, and you need to know this how it works.